Welcome, everyone, to the Coaches in Cahoots meeting. And today we have a very special guest. And we're going to let him present, and then we'll have time for Q&A and other shares, anything that you want to do. So I'll introduce Matthew to you. Matthew Cintron-Quiñones is a life and executive coach, and he especially works with leaders in the Latino community. He's a graduate of the Laser Focused Coaching Program, among others. And I really think of him as the Energizer Bunny of the coaching world. He is just so full of energy. It's incredible. Matthew's a very involved volunteer with the International Coaching Federation. He's a certified mentor coach, and he is running full speed towards his MCC, and we're all cheering for him. He's incredibly brilliant, but he's also just a lot of fun to be around. So I think you're really going to enjoy his wit and wisdom today as he shares his presentation on the multiverse of mentor coaching. So everybody, welcome Matthew. Matthew, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you, Nikki, for that very kind and accurate introduction. Very excited to be here with all of you to be sharing this experience to you. Not so much a presentation, but certainly an experience. So I'd like to just start off with a little bit of the inspiration for this workshop. And I think part of it, there's actually two inspirations. I'm going to share one in a bit. The inspiration was really how often that I'm working as a mentor coach. And I'm noticing that when I'm reviewing someone's recordings, I started to realize I'm saying the same thing over and over again. And so on one hand, I could make a group mentor coaching group and then tell it to multiple people. But then I thought, I don't want to. So then I thought, let's consolidate all the things that I've been noticing and let's do something with it. And it took me a little bit to figure out what am I going to do with all of this and how do I want to present it? And there was a origin story, if you will, like when Spider-Man gets bitten, I sort of got bitten, but you'll see. We're going to go ahead and dive in and we're going to see what we can learn. So if I could just see anyone with their thumbs up, if you can see the loading screen, it says the word loading on it. It's very boring. Thank you very much. And I'm going to have the chat open on my screen, so I should be able to see any chat messages. If I don't respond to it right away, just give me a second. And always, of course, feel free to raise your hand. And so as we start off, I would like to begin with an inspirational quote from one of the most important leaders in American history, and that's Taylor Swift. I'm taking a quote of hers and modifying it a little bit from her song Blank Space, which is, grab your passport and my hand. I can make bad coaching good for a weekend. Now, I'm kidding. There really is no such thing as bad coaching. Although, when you're as active a mentor coach as I am, that becomes debatable. Let's go ahead and dive in. This is called the multiverse of mentor coaching. I call it the multiverse because I like to think that, similar to other countries and other cultures, there really is no right or wrong way to do something. We all have different backgrounds. But when it comes to coaching, with so many coaching schools, I believe I actually recently counted, there's approximately 1,400 ACC, PCC level 1, level 2 schools out there. That's a lot of teaching, a lot of things. And let's be honest, not always effective or good. I've done a couple programs myself just because I like to learn and ruin my credit score. I'd like to help all of you to share what I've learned so that way you don't ruin your credit score and you don't spend money on programs that frankly are not worth the money. I will not be calling out those programs. If you want to know my real opinions on those, you can schedule a private conversation with me at another time and sign an NDA so I don't get sued. As Nikki so kindly shared, I am an active mentor coach. I've actually done 5 mentor coaching certifications. That's mainly not to brag, a little bit it is, but it's been a chance for me to really practice my craft and really support other people in mentor coaching. And I devoted myself to this because I saw how impactful it was for me when I got my first mentor coach. And on this screen, you're actually going to see this happened about December 8th, 2021. That was my very, very first mentor coaching session. And I learned so much about myself that it just kept going and I wouldn't stop. And I got my ICF credential back in June 2022. And that was, I think, a Friday or a Saturday. And that Wednesday, I signed my first mentor coaching contract. So I got started right away. As we spend these next couple moments together, you may hear things that you may have been taught by a master coach who's been in the field since the 1600s. That's nice, but as of 2024, I can tell you some of these approaches I strongly recommend you don't really do. And I'll give you some justifications why and some other ideas. And I also mentioned that there was inspiration for this program. So first of all, it was to really share what I've learned. But I was also in a workshop once, and we were doing a really cool scenario where we had a situation, and we were practicing what are some responses when you're focusing on, as the ICF says, the what, the tactical, the problem, and what are some of the approaches to approach the same scenario with a who approach. And there was a very nice lady in my group, and all of her options were terrible. I thought, oh my God, I would never ask any of those questions. Those are terrible. So I was very judgmental. That happens. And then I realized, well, how do I expect her to know? She wouldn't know some of the alternatives. And so that's when I realized, Matthew, take everything in your brain and let's put it out there. I also want to focus a little bit on just the value of mentor coaching. So a lot of us who have been aligned with ICF, they probably got mentor coaching in their coach training program or went out and sought a mentor coach. But truthfully, on paper, you're not required to get any more hours. There's a couple of nuances if you're renewing the ACC, but you don't really need to. And likewise, not every mentor coaching model is made the same, especially when they don't require you to bring in a recording. And if you're not getting a chance to really hear yourself coach, you're really missing out. And so a lot of the things we're going to go over, you're able to do a self-assessment, but you can also work with a mentor coach to help you see the things that you can't see. Mentor coaching is for life, not just a credential. It's an honest, objective assessment or review of your work. It can be revealing, uncomfortably, and comically, and inspiring to go to the next level. It's also a space to experiment, to record yourself knowing you're not going to do what you usually do. And of course, it's a case study, but the best part, it's a case study on you. What can be better than that? So mentor coaching is great for all levels, starting off when you're a little kitty at the ACC to a full-grown lion at the MCC. A guiding quote that we will be referring to. Some of the things that I say, in line with Green Day, it's something unpredictable, but in the end, it's right. So I don't proclaim to be right all the time, but I have a pretty good track record. So I invite you to hear what I have to say. It might shock you. It might make you think, what in the world just happened? Did he really just say that? That's normal, part of the experience. Just let it soak it in. And for those who know me, know that I've had an obsession with Law and Order for the past few months or year. And I recently watched an episode that had a perfect quote. Look, Dodds, there's two things you need to know about me. First, I like an open exchange of ideas. I agree, I do. And second, I'm usually right. With all that said, let's get going. Our first passport stamp is January 4, Spain. And I'd like to talk to you about the opening question to coaching sessions called, what do you want to talk about today? It sounds like a relatively normal question, pretty standard. And I'm going to invite you to stop using this question. And it has some cousins as well. What's on your mind? How are you doing today? What's going on? And perhaps my least favorite, what would you like to be coached on? A lot of these different phrases really invite the client to sometimes take it too literally, and they'll share everything going on for them. Do you really want to know what's on their mind? Really? There could be a lot. If you ever feel those moments when the clients keep talking and talking and talking, and like, when will they stop? It might be your fault because of the question you asked. I'm always recommending folks to really start with what I call strong verbs, because we are here in the session to work on something, to resolve something. And I want to know a little bit of context of what's going, but truthfully, it's not really useful for us to hear the whole story. If we find it useful, it's mainly because of our own curiosity, because we're just naturally nosy people. Some other examples that you might consider are, what would you like to focus on? What would be helpful to think about? what shall we work on together, and what's most important for us to explore. All of these have tend to serve coaching sessions pretty well, and you can mix and match the opening prefix of what's most important and what would be helpful, blah, blah, blah. All of that stuff is fair game. I also want to put a spotlight on what would you like to be coached on? Folks, coaching is not surgery. This is not an operation being done to somebody. So there's no need for us to ask our client what they want to be coached on. We're having a co-creative conversation. Let's invite them to exchange, to share things, or they're not here to report back to us. Okay, no one looks very upset or confused. Let's keep going. My next tip for you is, which one do you want to work on first? This is often a question when a client brings us 100,000 topics they want to talk about, if that's your opening question, or even if you do ask them what's important for us to work on together or focus on. They might give you several options. And you may have been trained, I certainly was, is to acknowledge what they said and then say, okay, so which one do you want to work on first? Or which one do you want to work on? Not even acknowledging first, because truthfully, you're probably not going to get to more than one. This is actually not always the best approach, because there's something about when humans share a lot of things, they're often connected in some way or another. Or in fact, they haven't even been asked. I wonder if those things are connected. So rather than essentially, quote unquote, forcing your client to pick one, invite them to see what else could be going on. We really don't need to narrow. If there's multiple topics, they're there for a reason. So let's bring them all together and let's check them out. This might sound like, I understand you want to work on A, B, and C. What might be the connection between those three? 99% chance no one has ever asked them that. It's also important that we suspend our own judgment and think about, well, there's no way those can be related. You actually might be surprised. Sometimes you can ask, what's important about the three of these today? If they're still kind of swirling around, you can just simply ask, what would be helpful to begin with? So we don't want to make them pick the most important or the first one. Just say, okay, where do you want to start? Always give your client the choice. It'll save you a lot of headache. Number 3, we're off to March. What have you tried before, or what have you tried already? All right, listen. You don't need to ask this ever, because who cares? Honestly, who cares? I don't need your sad story of everything you tried and why it didn't work and how your life is. I don't care. I mean, I just don't. I want to support you. I really do, but I don't need a sad story. So take it one step further. When you think about the things you've tried before, what have you learned? Or maybe, what have you learned thus far in trying to resolve this? And also, if they give you some kind of indication that, yeah, it's been going on for months, well, what's still making it a problem for you? That's where all the juicy stuff can come from, what they've learned and what's going on in the here and now. Now, some people give me a lot of pushback in this one, saying something like, but Matthew, I mean, I really want to know what they've tried before because to make sure we don't do it in a session. Well, that's not your job. Your job is to help them figure out their own stuff and help them think and figure it out. If you're asking this question, you are possibly subconsciously trying to solve their problem for them. If you have this question in your repertoire, I encourage you to put it in the paper shredder on the most intense setting and get rid of it. Comments or questions on this one? Thank you, Nikki. That's not your job. I believe that in a lot of ways, so we'll see where else I can throw that one in.
That applies to so many areas. Yeah.
Oh, it
Thank you
sure
for that.
does. Quarter one of our travels are done. We've just gone through March. Let's head into the spring season. What do we got for us in the spring? What would that look like? Yeah, I think this question, I don't like it. It's not great, because often it's inadvertently inviting a solution. What do you think that would look like? Well, do you think they know? If they knew, they wouldn't be there. It also favors visual learners. Now, it's not our job to ask them things that they do know. Sure, if they don't know something, we can help them think about it. But what are you expecting them? What would that look like? I often hear the client says, I want to make a plan for today. Coach will say, what would a plan look like? Again, we have a 30-minute session. We're not even there yet. Stop it. Just stop it. So I invite you to think about one step further and think about what the difference is going to be, or the impact, or the possible change. It takes less pressure on coming up with a solution, and also puts more of the autonomy in the client's hands. So some examples might be, suppose you had X, what difference would that make? So it goes beyond what the solution's going to look like, and think about, you had whatever it is, what's it going to do for you? That can reveal their values, what's important to them, emotions, a lot of more juicy stuff. Another option could be, if you had why, what would you notice about yourself? If you had a plan, what would you notice? I would feel more confident. I'd feel a lot happier. And already there, you got some more juicier topics that you can explore. I have found that what would that look like a little bit, again, a little bit more helpful toward the end of a session. And it can also help to understand their current patterns. So a trick that I like to use is to ask in the third person. Let's use Nikki as an example. So if Nikki was saying she really wanted to come up with a plan, I might ask in a third person, so when Nikki comes up with plans, what do they typically look like? That can give me a little bit of information on her way of processing, her thinking, the designs that she likes. Maybe she's an artist, and maybe that means we use more art in the session or something like that.
I like the stepping into the third person. That's interesting. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks, Matthew.
Of course. Let's go to May. What will be your measure of success? You know, there is some schools, one of the ones I went through will not be named, that will actively tell their learners of coaching to ask this question verbatim. Can you not? Because do you talk like this? Grandma, what will be your measure of success this weekend when we go to the bakery? Even at work. I mean, success measures are a real thing. But a coaching conversation, no matter who you're meeting with, it should be a conversation, casual, not too casual and easy breezy, beautiful cover girl. I did have one client who would actively speak like this. In that case, I did use his words. You may know the alternate, a little bit more casual, yet still effective. How will you know that blah, 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 what you're going to get? There is another method that can help you get to more of the emotion, more of the underlying thing. Suppose you had this plan, what might you notice? You invite the client to think in the future, explore, and think about what they really want. And in your listening, you can tend to listen for an emotion or some kind of state of being. And that usually gives you a measure of success for your session. It's not so much about creating a plan, it's the confidence or the happiness they're going to feel after the plan, after the clarity, after the strategy. I mean, that's the holy trifecta of coaching. Your clients want a plan, a clarity, and a strategy. It's not much else is out there. So you can do one more thing with them and help them think beyond that. And once you kind of have that state of being, you can invite a comparison, such as, if you have this plan, you're going to be more confident. Well, how confident are you right now? And how confident do you want to be at the end of the session? Now, you want to really support them to come up with their own measuring system. It can be really easy to add a scale of 1 to 10. I am a numbers guy and I love that scale, but it is leading your client to what you think is going to be the most effective. If they're really stuck, you can certainly introduce it to them. It's really important that they come up with their own difference between where they want to be and where they are. Another option can be sensations, such as what they might feel in the body. Unless that's your style and your clients know that about you, I would be careful about introducing those questions. You might get some real WTF reactions. So you want to plan and you want to feel more confident. Where in your body will you feel more confident? If someone asked me that, I would tell them to shut up and I would disconnect my internet. That's not the way that I think. It would be caught me off guard. Some people love that. So it's important that you know what the client likes and prefers and what your style is and why they came to you in the first place.
I have a question. So,
Yes.
Matthew, a few minutes ago, you said this is the holy trinity of coaching, and I didn't quite get the three things. Can you repeat that?
Yes, yes. So it's more of an exaggeration, but oftentimes when a client comes to a session and they're on that surface level, they want one of three things: a plan, clarity, or a strategy.
Oh, okay. So that's what you were saying. That okay, got
Yeah,
it. All
yeah.
right.
Let's step into June and see what June has for us. Tell me more. Say more. I went to a school that would list this under a powerful question. Does anyone see a question mark on my screen? I don't. Tell me more about what? Regarding what? I like to call this, if you wouldn't tell your client to clean their room, then don't tell me more. Can you imagine saying someone, hey, go clean your room? No, don't tell me what to do. And some people argue, well, it's to help the client keep talking. Do you really want that? More about what? I have one of my favorite case studies. I was going over someone's recording, and this coach asked her client, tell me more. The client spoke for almost exactly 11 minutes straight. Oh my goodness. I almost upcharged her for this session because that was a horrible thing to listen to. I think there's something deeper and more valuable when you find out what it means for the client. So instead of saying, tell me more, you could say, what does that mean for you? Or what's important about that? Of course, customizing your questions. What's important about a good relationship with your neighbors versus tell me more about your neighbors or your relationship with them. No, no. It's cousin, say more. Yeah, I don't recommend that one either. Now, if you must, it can be helpful to add some kind of observation to invite the client to talk more. So this might sound like I'm just going to pick on Nikki because she's lovely and I see her first on my screen. So, Nikki, I noticed that when you were talking about ice cream, you started to frown. What more can you say about that? That's a little bit better. We're inviting something a bit more specific, and it's more invitational. If there's one thing you take away from this presentation, it is to stop saying, tell me more. It's terrible. And it will make your mentor coach, whether it's me or someone else, very cranky. Mainly me. I can't speak for others, but we're here to listen to me, and that's what matters. Okay, let's go on to our next tip. This one's a bundle of things, and these are things the client typically tells us as a request or an offer, and kind of something they want us to respond to. Now, everything they say, of course, we're going to respond to, more or less, but these are more active ones, such as, hey, did I answer your question? Does that make sense? Oh, I forgot the question. And also when they say, I'm sorry. So when these instances happen, probably our natural reaction is to ask the question again, to tell them, yeah, of course it makes sense. I forgot the question. Okay, I can tell you it again. And I'm sorry, like, oh no, it's okay, everything's fine. No need to apologize. So as a coach, these are traps. And this is the invitation to stop being nice. Because these are really good moments to actually learn a little bit more about your client at a deeper level. So let's say a client says, does that make sense? I like to throw it back. Well, what's making sense to you right now? And that actually helps the client get a little bit more confident with their own belief and their own opinion. If you are a more challenging and sassier coach, what difference does it make if it makes sense to me? That is not for the faint of heart, but it can be really effective. I did try this one out once, and the client said, oh, I guess I don't need your approval. Whoa, where did that come from? Really, really interesting. So if they say, I forgot the question, you might say, do you want me to repeat the question, or would you like me to offer what I'm noticing now? Yes, it's close-ended, but it is in the spirit of partnership, and it gives them the choice of how they would like you to respond. Because also, it doesn't really matter. They said something. A fun one can be, what question do you think you answered? Because you'll be surprised how quickly they actually remember the question that you asked them. Because you're putting the, I wouldn't say pressure, but the attention back on them to figure it out. The last one on here is, I'm sorry. And depending on their mood, there is an opportunity here to say, what are you apologizing for? And that can really open up some things. And before you know it, you have, again, more juicier, impactful things to coach on. So stop being nice. We can be supportive and we can help them think. Because that's one of the best gifts that we can give them, is to help them think. And I invite you all to try at least once to say, what difference does it make if it makes sense to me? In the moment, you'll get the adrenaline, like, oh no, am I going to say it right now? This is the best moment. Oh no. And then off you go. And even sassier moments that I recently had, the client asked me, does that make sense? And I say, does it matter? With attitude. Just kind of came out. And she said, well, you're a more logical person than I am. And then I said, how do you know I'm logical? And then she realized, oh, I'm making an assumption. Mic drop. Nikki, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out everything that you are saying here is such a beautiful demonstration of how you don't get sucked in to what they're saying or anything. It's everything that you are presenting back to the client, your being, your questions is just a reflection of your curiosity and responsiveness to the client and what they're bringing.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Number 8. I'd like to make an observation. Then do it. Just do it. If you're going to say something, perhaps one might say a bit more scandalous, you might want to ask permission just to give them the preface like, hey, I got something coming your way. But if you're noticing something, just offer it. Now, with that said, it's super important that you add an immediate follow-up question after you offer an observation. This is not taught well in coaching schools. That is I'm going to call it a fact, but it really isn't. Some teach it really well. There's some idea where you can say an observation and just be silent. And then what? The client may not know how to respond. Is there more to this? Well, what's going on? Consistently ask a follow-up question to really invite your client to respond to it. It can be something as simple as, what's going on for you? Or if you're sassier, what's up with that? Here's an example. I'm noticing that when you talk about buying a zoo, you smile a lot. What's going on for you? If you just said that, the client may know how to respond, or they may not. It's kind of like giving someone a high five and they don't return the high five. You're leaving them hanging. So don't leave your observations hanging. It is also in the competencies. It's not worded the best, but it does say that you invite the client to respond in any way or invite them to explore when you're going to share something. Okay, we are now moving into the fall. So what I hear you say is blah, 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 blah. Is that right? Ugh, this one kind of irks me. I mean, they all do, but this one, yeah. Because, yes, that is what I said. Sometimes you might be being helpful and summarizing or repeating back what they say, but I mean, sometimes the reaction is, that's exactly what I said. And your point? The last part, is that right? Well, this is not a game show. We're not trying to be right. Coaching is not a game show. Coaching is also without attachment. So who cares if we're right or wrong? Okay, yes, it's nice when we get it right. It's a really cool feeling. I will tell you that. It's like, yes. But that is a moment of coach ego, totally normal. We don't want to say and not for super long. Repeating back to the client what you heard them say can be helpful. When it starts to sound like you're just repeating everything, like you're reading off a menu, like, okay, today's specials are, no one cares. So if you're going to summarize, or as I prefer to reflect back, you can offer an observation. You can explore more deeply with a more relevant follow-up question. You can also honor your natural curiosity, whatever you're naturally thinking. How can you spin that and ask in a coaching-like question? Or my favorite, just don't summarize. You really hardly need to. In fact, one of the best ways to summarize is to not summarize at all by using the client's language to build your questions. That shows how you summarize and that you're listening. And really think about some of your recent coaching moments when you have summarized. Are you doing it because it helps you process aloud to make sure you heard the client right? Or are you really doing it so the client understands what they just said, especially if what they said was a load of bananas? If we're not right, okay, we tried.
I have a question, Matt. How do you know when to give an observation or reflection versus not to do one and just go straight into a question?
Very good question. I like to refer to where those two coaching skills are in the competency model, and there are two. The first one is trust and safety. It's to share an observation if we think that sharing it or putting it on the table is going to make the client feel safe, that they can explore something, that they can share something, that we are in a safe space to really look at something together. That's one opportunity. The second one is again to evoke awareness. Are we sharing something so that way they can possibly think differently about something or to bring up something they can't see? So if we're just summarizing to synthesize, it can be helpful, but it's just again regurgitating what they already said. But if we're doing it to, as I said, build more safety or help them see something differently, then it's a lot more effective. I like to use the example of, let's say you have a client who's saying that they are really trying to add light exercise to their routine. Keyword is light exercise. And then you find out late in the session that their current idea is every Saturday they're going to run 20 kilometers. I don't know about you, unless you're one of the Marvel characters, 20 kilometers running is not a light exercise. And so a summary could be, and so what I hear you saying is on Saturdays, you want to run 20 kilometers. Great, well done. But you might also offer, so Ben, I noticed that moments ago you said that you'd like to do more light exercise. And then I just heard you say you're going to run 20 kilometers. And feel free to push back, but when I think of light exercise, that does not sound light to me. What are your thoughts?
Thanks, man.
Pointing at discrepancies can be really powerful. Yes, Nikki, absolutely. It's one of my favorite things to do. Let's head off to October. So this is actually not something that necessarily is something to quote unquote stop doing. It's actually a bit of a yes and opportunity. It's the question, what is it costing you? Often we might ask it, when is it costing you to keep doing this or to not do this or something like that? There's an opportunity to take it one step further. What else? And this can work for a lot of other things, such as what else are you feeling? What else are you telling yourself? What else are you thinking? Because the easy answer is the first thing they're going to say off the top of their head, which is great. You're probably going to get some valuable data. At the same time, when you ask them what else, you very much likely are going to get, they have to really think like, oh crap, what else is really going on? And that might help them really, really think a lot more deeply and to feel more things and to uncover things. So this one again, what is it costing you? Great question. Really works really well. And the trick is also to repeat the whole thing. So let's say they're telling you, I work 16-hour days. What is it costing you to work 16-hour days? Okay, they'll give you an answer. Then push back, or what else is it costing you to work 16-hour days? They might have nothing, or they might have something. Emily, that's a great opportunity. Yes. What is working in this situation? That can be a fun one when it so obviously is not working. I like that one. Thank you for that. Okay, we're coming down to the end, so let's see what November has in store for us. So this is not a quote, this is an activity. For this trick, I need a volunteer. So that's not something you would say in coaching, but I do need a volunteer for this lesson. Would anyone like to come off mute and volunteer? I promise you it's very simple. Madura?
Yeah.
Thank you for volunteering. So for this trick, what I'd like you to do is tell me about your day yesterday in as much detail as possible without getting too granular. You may begin whenever you're ready.
Yesterday was a productive day.
Mm-hmm.
A couple coaching sessions still, and then when I went out for a ride with a friend
Right. Uh-huh.
and couldn't walk my dog because it was a rainy day.
Mm.
And then I was gonna have some friends come over for dessert. So husband planned some. Yeah, he said
Wow.
he said he'll make some omelets.
All right. Thank you, Madura. Thank you for volunteering. So I think that lesson spoke for itself, but let's go ahead and look at it real quickly. It is the art of saying all of these super annoying sounds. And Madura, I couldn't see you, but just in the communication and being aware of this myself, I could get a sense of when I was saying those things, you either stop talking or I got the sense this was kind of frustrating. What was your experience though?
Yeah, it was definitely annoying because I was feeling a bit interrupted with the hms and ahs. I'm like, wait, and I was losing my chain of thought.
Oh my goodness, we need this in writing. Everything she just said. It is honestly, it makes the point so perfectly. I did not pay her for this. She is receiving no financial compensation whatsoever. The ICF does not like this. They will actively point out on their assessments because they consider interruption. More so, there's actually quite a lot of research out there on the trouble of these sounds. While we may typically demonstrate these sounds because we want to show that we're listening and we're being really attentive to the client, they are actually interruptions. They can get in the way of the client's thought process. In this demo we did, I could kind of tell that Maduro would stop speaking because I was making a sound. When we make these sounds, even subtly, it will encourage the client to keep talking. That is not always a good thing because they're likely going to keep telling you a very long story. And I just did this 2 days ago. I actually looked up for another reason in the dictionary, and it literally says to indicate approval and acceptance. No. Yes, keep talking. Yes, I love what you're saying. It becomes super annoying. It's indirective passive cheerleading. We don't need that. There's plenty of other cheerleaders in people's lives. A coach can be someone to champion and also challenge. Your client hears you, and also it's the same for the words, right? And then I did this, right? So when the client's saying that, those are not entryways to respond. They don't really need you to respond to when they say, they don't need you to respond to saying, right? So every time you hear those, that's a trap. Be quiet. When the client is speaking, 100% silence, because that gives them the space. It allows you to hear better. Plus, if there's too much silence, they might stop talking and realize, I think I don't want to talk anymore. And there you go. You have less to respond to. Now, you might think, oh, I don't do it that much, only every now and then. Well, this is what makes me a unique mentor coach. When I work with people, I require a transcript. And if their transcript does not have these sounds, I go back in and I put them all in with the precise timestamp that I heard them. It's a great challenge for you to record yourself and get a transcript and start counting, because if you don't, I will. And just yesterday, I typed up what you can see on the right for a client in a feedback form. I counted every timestamp she had an interruption and what she said. Predominantly there were and yeah. I counted there were about 68 interruptions in a 30-minute session. And when I did some brujeria and math, I found out that approximately when the client's speaking, every 7 seconds, she said an interruption. I don't know about you, but when I see this on the screen, that's pretty much a good awakening to stop doing that. It can be hard. It is a common thing people do struggle with, so I do honor that, but it's certainly an area of growth, and I used to be so bad at this. It's terrifying to listen to one of my first calls. Those are going to be in the Disney vault for as long as I can, never to be released. Once I pass, if they want to release them, great, but they're not great. So you don't think I will count your mm-hms? As the GIF here says, don't believe me, just watch.
What about nodding your head?
That is a great question. So if you're on video, nodding, yes. The answer to everything in coaching is it depends. Remember that. I think a slight nod is fine. If you're going all rock and roll on your clients, that's annoying. I was in a workshop once, and I'm going to try and demonstrate it. But this poor woman, la pobre, she was up against the camera and she just kept like rocking her head like, yes, So in combination with I believe that's a felony. If you nod your head so much and say, you're going to get arrested. So in moderation, we're not here. This is not the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And the last one, in my opinion, is fairly tame, but I invite you to think beyond your current approach. And that's the question, what action will you take? So verbatim said like this, to me, ladies and gentlemen, it's kind of cringe. What action will you take? Why so serious? It just, makes me vomit. I don't like hearing that question. I mean, it's important. You do want to know what the client is going to do after the session. However, if you say it like that, action just sounds a little bit serious. So perhaps you can do it a bit more simply, such as, what would you like to do next? That's more casual, still impactful, and helps the client move forward. I have a bias toward a word that I have found in 4 different sources as a recommended approach. What would you like to experiment with? So you might ask at the end of the session, what have you learned about yourself? You can build off of that. And so now that you know that you're a people pleaser, what could be viable to experiment with? The word experiment also offers the freedom to totally bomb and mess up. I'm going to try something, and I'm actually not that attached to the outcome. I have a hypothesis of how it's going to work, but if it doesn't, I'd learn something different now. So I always strongly recommend that folks get to play with this phrase instead of just saying so seriously, what action will you take? Also, not everything's action. Sometimes experimentation is thinking, feeling, reflecting, all sorts of things. And so, my dear group, you have listened to a very opinionated, caffeinated Latino coach. I hope you have learned a lot, and I hope you will consider trying out or experimenting some things. I invite you to think about the following. What have you learned about yourself in this presentation? And then whatever that learning is, how can you experiment with that? If anyone wants to share in the chat what they've learned and what they're going to experiment with, that would be great. Otherwise, Nikki, back to you.
Thank you, Matthew. Really nice. Let's open it up. Everybody, you can come off mute. Let's hear from you. What are you taking away from what Matthew shared here today, or what questions do you have? Was anything surprising to you?
I enjoyed being able to be a part of this today. I appreciate the freeness in your delivery, Matthew. So that was great. And my different trainings, it's always been a little bit more stoic. I think asking all the questions that you went over today are definitely questions that I've noticed when I work with my clients, it stops them. And it stops the success of getting somewhere. It turns more into me pulling out to where I've like, okay, I've stepped too far, or I didn't do the right thing at this point. So now it's no longer about them, it's about me. So I really appreciate it. So thank you.
It's really lovely the way you, just your presence, Matthew, the way you come across as you teach. And I can just imagine, I definitely want to be coached by Matthew. So questions, comments, takeaways, just anybody.
I love your sense of humor. I wish I had a little bit of this myself. And the presentation was so amazing, very insightful, impactful, inspiring.
I want to pick up on something you said, that you wish you could be more like this. The point is, this is who Matthew is. Got a little bit of sass there, right? We're not all necessarily like that, but the point is to bring your full self, whoever you are, however you are, to truly be present and authentic with your client and not hold back. So it's not that you have to use as much sass or humor, but bring your full self to that client session.
So one question I had was these insights that we have about, what's the questions, what we heard today, like how to link it together in a session. Because now I feel like I have these like amazing things, but when a session happens with a client and every person is different, right? Topic is different, like the trinity is different with every person. So like how in my brain, like my question is like, how do I link it together? Is it spontaneous practice, or is it like, should I have like a methodology or something in my head? So that's a vague question, but I kind of always struggle with that.
Can you give me an example? I'm not sure I fully understand.
So, like, for example, you gave us these examples, right? Like, this is the question that we typically ask, and these are the problems with the question, and you could ask this instead, right? And the reasons why. Now, I feel a pressure in my head to ask all the right questions in a session.
I gave out 12 different approaches. And so the idea is certainly not to try all 12 in the next coaching session. And that's why at the end, I really emphasize what do you want to experiment with. And so a lot of this is going to come to your own style and a lot of trial and error, which can be pretty uncomfortable, but it is what's going to help you figure out what's going to work best for you. As well as you start to pick up on different cues, like if you have a client who always goes into the past, we don't have to spend a lot of time there finding out what's working. For me, at least, when I hear the past, that's often a clue to look into learning, because that's probably the one thing they haven't really thought of before. I would encourage you not to put too much pressure and just start with one or two things that you can try differently. And then that also comes to recording yourself. If you record yourself and go back to your recording, do not do it on the same day. You're not going to hear anything different. You're just going to be really proud of yourself, which is a great feeling. Let me tell you that. Record yourself, look at it the next day or later on, and you're going to hear things so much more differently. And it's been cited by several quote unquote master coaches. It's one of the fastest ways to get to mastery. Record yourself and listen to it.
I will second that wholeheartedly. Do not try to do more than one or maybe two things as you're working on improving your coaching. Work on one thing at a time. It's too much when you start trying, and then you get the focus back on yourself. And what am I doing right or wrong? Just start experimenting and implementing one or two of these ideas and see what happens. Well, Matthew has been basically running at full steam since he earned his PCC, and it's really done a nice job of condensing things down, making them simple and making them fun. I used to have a friend, and that was his personal slogan: keep it simple, make it fun. And I think Matthew really embodies that. Okay, everyone, who else? Any other takeaways, questions, comments?
I just love what Matthew is doing, like just the courage to be himself, just to go out there and to me it's like knowing what works. Perhaps it takes courage to do, and he just does it. I think it sometimes does take courage to be a little sassy and challenge the client, like I think we're supposed to and at times, versus beating around the bush or tiptoeing around. I wouldn't want that question asked to me, so I'm not going to ask it for the client. In the spirit of partnering and helping the client move forward.
Yeah, and don't make assumptions. That's just because it might not be something that would land for you. You never know with the client. Well, anybody else have anything that you would like to share today or ask, that even if it doesn't have to do with Matthew's presentation? Is there any way we can support you in a little bit of time here today?
So when you're recording your transcripts, are you using your Zoom transcripts, or how are you using what specific software are you using for your?
That's a wonderful question. So yes, Zoom can transcribe. Its export is ugly and really hard to work with. It'll add a timestamp every like nanosecond. It's very frustrating to work through. So if I use a Zoom transcript, it's to help me in that moment and live to capture what the client's speaking in case I just, I want to be more attentive. For my own learning, I typically go to AI. So the most popular one in the ICF coaching realm is certainly RaeNotes, RAE notes.com. Really great service. They'll capture everything cleanly. So for example, if I say, I want to, let's go for a ride. Talking to my dog, apparently. That will only capture the last part. Let's go for a ride. The full sentence that I finish. I think it's called in grammar a false start. So it'll cut out some of those things. So it makes it really easy to read. There's another one that I use called Sonix, sonix.com. Wow, that one will capture almost everything really strongly with AI. And if you're going for a verbatim transcript, that one's very revealing and won't take too long to clean up for an official purpose. I really like Sonic. I'm really impressed with it. So those would be the two that I recommend. There are paid services, and I think they all got together and raised their prices, so I'm not a big fan of them right now. But for now, those are the two that I would really recommend for learning purposes.
I wholeheartedly agree. The Zoom transcript is not good. It's just too hard to wade through. Okay, well, unless anyone has anything else, Matthew, I just want to thank you so much for being here and for presenting. And thank you all for participating and coming today. I hope this has given you a lot to think about and some things to experiment with. And I hope it helps you with your coaching.